Sylvia Mackey. In 2006, Sylvia left the sidelines and took to the field to advocate for her husband, John, and others living with frontotemporal dementia, along with her 2 daughters. Sylvia also co-founded the John Mackey Fund, a 501c3 organization that raises funds for research for FTD. She also serves on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Association of Baltimore and the board of directors for the Association for Frontotemporal Degenerations. She travels the country to share her story and is passionate about educating, supporting, and advocating for those caring for loved ones with FTD. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Sylvia Mackey.
Thank you for inviting me to be your keynote speaker today. It is an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Kevin, for the fine introduction. It was late December back in '63, December 28th of 1963, when I married the love of my life. What a guy, what a time. My college sweetheart, a day that will always stand out in my mind because I also didn't know what was coming next. We both had graduated from Syracuse in June of '63, but we were not married until after his first season with the Baltimore Colts, where he was the second draft choice. He wanted to prove that he could be the best football player at the tight end position for the Colts. Then after that, after he mastered that, then he could focus on me and the life that we had planned to spend together forever. Now fast forward to December of 2001. 38 years later, the love of my life was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia with severe shrinkage of the left temporal lobe. This is the part of the brain that controls how we think, what we say to another in our group, and to be aware of the audience around us and to know the proper thing to say and to know how to conduct ourselves. However, before this, I can think of one incident in every decade of my husband's life since football that stands out in my mind as strange, even though at the time I thought, oh, this is just strange, and I'd let it pass. But after they added up, 1 per decade, believe it or not, these stuck in my mind. And every incident was accompanied by a very eerie blank stare. In his late 30s, John was asked to give the Syracuse University Alumni of the Year award to a colleague because John had received it the year before. That was their tradition. He loved speaking. He loved being in front of an audience, and he was always well prepared to speak. But just as he was leaving for the speech, he turns and he says to me, "I'm not going." And I thought, what? You're not going? I was speechless. I was in shock. I didn't know what to say. I watched him as he crossed the room, and he just sat down and he looked at me with an unemotional blank stare, a stare that haunted me for years. And then the phone started ringing. You know, where is John? What is he going to show up? Where are you guys? Well, the only thing I could think of was that he had suddenly taken ill. Little did I know how ill he would really become 20 years later as the years went on and on. Then one day in his mid-40s, he received a phone call, and I assumed after the second call, which followed immediately, what he was going to tell me when I heard him say to a friend, "Yeah, man, my mom just kicked over." And I'm thinking, Mom just kicked over? That's street talk for my mother just died. And I looked at him again, and he had that very eerie blank stare. And I thought, there must be something wrong with the way he's even taking this. He's responding with no emotion, just that blank stare that I had remembered from 10 years before that. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just ride this out and just see what's going to happen. Because I expected that something maybe sooner than 10 years later would come up again. But then In his 50s, he paid $300 to sign up for a series of yoga classes. He went to one class, and when I asked him why he hadn't gone to more, he said, "Oh, I learned how to do it that one time. I don't have to go back anymore." And I thought that was strange, but maybe he thinks he is that great. You know, sometimes the old football players, think they can go back in the old days. Yes, I'm that great. But it made me furious. And I tried to remain calm, but even that answer, which could have become argumentative if I'd wanted to, again, he showed me that blank stare. Thank you. Soon after this, he paid $1,000 for a bicycle, never used it, gave it to a friend 2 weeks later. And when I questioned him about that, because I guess I was showing my anger, he gave me again that blank stare. What was happening here was that he was slowly becoming detached from reality. When I would question him about and he could not give me an explanation. He could only, again, give me that blank stare. It was so eerie, I just have to keep saying it. So then I started making a list of all the bizarre behaviors because I didn't want to leave anything out if I had to consult someone. I must have known that soon I was going to have to consult a doctor about these. He had become so apathetic about life in general. He no longer recognized the need of paying taxes, saving money, and the need for a regular paycheck. He had become totally apathetic about everything that was important in life. So I thought, well, maybe he just needs a job. So I consulted a friend, a former colleague, Floyd Little of the Denver Broncos, recent Hall of Famer. Floyd at the time owned a car dealership in Seattle, Washington. We were living in California. I thought John would be good at selling cars. He could hand out autographed footballs and autographed pictures with every car that he sold, plus the dealership was out of town. And I thought that his being away for a week or two would sound really good to me because this would give me a well-deserved break. And I felt, well, he needs a break from me too. That's what it is, always coming up with excuses. But Floyd wrote a letter back saying he had a friend in Long Beach where we lived who had a dealership and he thought John might fit in there. So I had to give up that idea. But I had reached a new point in life, and all of the incidents that led up to this point made me realize that one of us needed a regular job with a regular paycheck. My having been a model for 30 years and under an independent contract for the entire 30 years, I knew that one of us needed a job with a big corporation that would give us the regular paycheck and provide the health and dental benefits that we needed. John didn't get it. But I started looking in the paper, the employee section of the Los Angeles Times, actually looking for a job for him. I wanted to find something that would appeal to him where I could say, honey, look, maybe you have to go out for this interview yourself. But then I stumbled upon the ad for bilingual flight attendants for United Airlines, and I thought, I'll show him, I'll apply for this just to show him that it takes a real effort to get a job. It's not going to just drop in your lap. But at this point, I did not realize that I was in denial because I thought that jobs and being busy for either one of us might solve his problem, especially when he would see the benefits of a regular paycheck. Now this brings me to another point, denial. I'm sure everybody who is caring for a loved one or has a loved one in their family with any of these neurological diseases has at some point gone through a stage of denial. But I discovered two types of denial, creative denial and normal denial. I had actually created in my mind that the reason he was acting so strange was that he must be in some sort of trouble and he doesn't want to tell me because he always stressed that he would protect his family no matter what he had to do. I thought maybe there's something he's hiding and that if someone came to me to question me about him, I could actually say that he was mentally unfit to answer any questions. I thought he had it all figured out. Now, with normal denial, I wanted to believe that he was just tired and depressed and didn't know how to find a job. I really began to feel that he was just too embarrassed to say that he was depressed, and I thought he just didn't know what to do. But as a wife, I was trying to support him. I didn't want to be hostile. So when the job came as a flight attendant, to be a flight attendant for United Airlines, when that was offered to me, I jumped at it, even though I had been afraid to fly. I just wanted to give my husband an opportunity to think. And then I found that after I got the job for United Airlines, I had to go to Chicago for 2 weeks. For 2 months, 2 months away. And I thought, this is the break that I need. This will be good for him because it will show him and give him time to think about what he has to do. See, I'm still in denial. Well, I graduated from flight school in Chicago, and I had to get on a plane to go to work. I had to go from California to Chicago to start all of my trips. And it was during this time on my days off at home in California that I saw that my husband was not getting any better. In fact, he was getting worse. I noticed that when he picked me up from the airport, the parking fee, he was paying more and more for parking, and not because the fee went up, but it was because he was getting there earlier and earlier. I later found out from one of the agents that when he came to pick me up, he'd been waiting for me for 4 hours, just sitting in that one spot with his big signature cowboy hat on, just staring. And I thought, this is just too strange, but because after all this time, he's not that anxious to see me. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the day that he asked me if I had contacted Al Davis, the then owner of the Oakland Raiders, to see if Al had a job for him in the Raiders office. Oh, that set me off. I started screaming and yelling at him, and I got no reaction at all. Again, that eerie blank stare. The less responsive he became, well, he wasn't responsive at all, the angrier I became. So I escalated my language and my delivery, saying things I wouldn't even repeat here, saying things I would have been afraid to say to him at that time. But I got no reaction. Again, that eerie blank stare, as though nothing bothered him at all. And to be honest with you, nothing did bother him at all. He was as happy as he could be. He wasn't depressed. But when I realized this was the turning point. This let me know that I had to find out the truth. So I took him to several doctors before I found the right one. And every time I took him to a doctor, I had to tell him that he was going to a doctor's appointment with me and I needed him. I had to be cautious about everything I said, because when I would say to him, honey, there's something wrong with you, and he would say, the only thing wrong with me is you. And that didn't hurt because I knew something was wrong. He didn't mean that. That wasn't the John Mackey that I married. Then September 11th, 2001, John's reaction to that terrible day let me know that he wasn't even aware of the news and things that were going on around him. So I was furloughed for 3 months after 9/11, and during those 3 months, those 90 days, it gave me the opportunity to take John to the proper doctors to get a diagnosis. A geriatric psychiatrist told me he had organic brain syndrome. Okay, now what am I supposed to do with that? Then I found a neurologist who suggested that John have a PET scan or a brain MRI. But John wouldn't submit to the in-and-out office visits because you had to take a needle to get the proper imaging, and Big John Mackey was afraid to take a needle. So I took him to UCLA Geriatric Psychiatric Hospital, and they had to hospitalize him for 4 days in order to get the test, which could have been done in an in-and-out visit, but I couldn't explain that to him. The results: frontal temporal dementia. Now, believe it or not, the diagnosis was a relief, because instantly all of my frustrations and anger drained out of me like sand through a sieve, because now I knew that my life had taken on a new and different challenge. We were now facing new beginnings. So I had to do a lot of research on the internet on frontal temporal dementia in order to learn what to expect, because preparation is everything. I learned so much about this disease, what a horrible, ugly decline in one's life it creates. And I learned that in the United States of America, unfortunately, this can bankrupt a family. These diseases make one become any and everything they would not want to be. There's no cure. There's no turning back. There are no Alzheimer's or dementia survivors on this earth. And a family taking care of someone with these slow degenerative diseases, this is a very, very costly and long goodbye. And as a caregiver, I had to learn that I am no longer taking care of or dealing with the person that I love the way he used to be. I am now dealing with the disease, but I'm loving this person at the same time. With the knowledge of his diagnosis, though, becoming such a relief for me, I immediately knew I had to find a new direction in life. I had to focus on saving and protecting what we had worked on all our lives as a family, because progress on his end would never, ever happen again. The thoughts of how we were going to spend the rest of our lives together would disappear because this was not going to happen. But again, as I'm stressing, it's a new beginning. You have to turn yourself around from what you were thinking and put a positive outlook on how you can make life be the best that it can be. Now, frustration and anger are negative and self-defeating, and they use too much energy in a negative direction. And I've always been a very, very positive person. I knew now I had to change my thoughts, but where would I turn to make this possible? I had heard about support group meetings. Kind of didn't know what that meant, but I thought, I had negative feelings about that. I had created a negative stigma about support group meetings. I felt that this was an occasion and a meeting for miserable people to get together and cry on each other's shoulders. And I didn't want to be associated with any negativity. So one day, though, I said, I'm going to try it. I literally dragged myself to one of these meetings. And I thought, maybe it won't be so depressing. I don't know. But let me tell you, I found out that I had been wrong all along. They were not depressing at all. They were uplifting and inspirational. And it seemed that I was also helping other people with my participation, and I especially enjoyed that aspect of it. I also learned that I was not alone. I learned that I had to plan ahead, become creative in how to handle my husband from this point on. I learned that I had to stay positive, and this is a very important part of self-preservation, staying positive. You can't let yourself get down physically or mentally. The first thing I had to do was to move from California, where we had lived for 30 years. I never thought I'd be leaving California. I called it the last paradise. I thought, where should I move to? Well, there was only one word, one city that popped up in my mind because John was still familiar with Baltimore from being a Baltimore Colt. I had to move back to Baltimore. The fans and people in Baltimore still appreciate the Baltimore Colts that still live there now as if they had just won the last Super Bowl. If I had asked John at that time whom he worked for, he would say, oh, I work for the Baltimore Colts. I also felt that by moving back to Baltimore that I was preparing for what I had read about could be a wandering stage where they leave the house and they get lost. But I felt almost anybody in Baltimore would know John Mackey. He'd get home. And the decision paid off. Just a few months later, we were at a Ravens game. And after the game, John got caught up in the crowd and lost. My daughter was with me, and she said, Mommy, we can't leave the stadium until we find Daddy. We need to call the police right now. I said, just wait a minute, Laura. Don't worry. We'll call home in an hour, and I bet you he'll answer the phone. And it was 45 minutes later. I called home. He answered the phone. Now, remember, he'd been with us at the game all day. He said, where have you guys been? I've been home waiting for you all day. So right away, I knew that was another straw in the camel's back. I knew I had made the right decision to move back to Baltimore. It was a Baltimore fan that brought him home. He did know his address and everything then. But I constantly kept in mind that all of the challenges would become more and more difficult. But I knew what to expect, even though I didn't know when, because I had scoured the internet to learn everything I could about frontotemporal dementia. I just wanted to be prepared. Preparation and patience are everything. I knew that his attention span would get shorter and shorter in anything that he enjoyed and liked to do. Fortunately, for the Colts and other ball players living in the area, Autograph shows and memorabilia shows are very popular all up and down the East Coast where they can get paid. People buy tickets and stand in line to get the autographs of their favorite players to this day. And I, with the help of a dear friend, was able to keep John active going to these events and getting paid for them as long as possible. Now, at one of these shows with about 50 people in line in front of his table, John suddenly stood up after he'd been signing many autographs and footballs, and he said, "I'm not signing anymore." The crowd was horrified. But I said to him, "Just a minute, he'll be right back." I had to try one of my tactics that I'd read about online, redirecting. I took him to the hall behind the autograph table. I directed his attention to his Super Bowl and Hall of Fame rings, which he wore all the time and was very proud of, as you'll see in some videos that are coming up. And I said, "Honey, there is a crowd of fans and children out here who would love to see these rings, and this would make them very happy." He said, "All right." In 30 seconds, he was back at the autograph table to finish the rest of them as though he had just been starting that day. What is important here, again, I say it, I had learned to redirect. The key word here is redirect. And when I learned that, it made life much easier.
Sometimes the mind fades before the man does. What did you do yesterday?
Yesterday? Ask my wife.
If I were to ask you, John, do you remember what you did yesterday?
What did we do, baby? We went somewhere, didn't we?
Where'd you go?
I don't know. You have to ask her. I don't remember, man. Yesterday.
Yet so much of John Mackey's life has left an indelible impression. 10 seasons in the NFL between 1963 and 72. 2 Super Bowls with the Baltimore Colts. His force on the field is captured in a single play here against Detroit in 1966, when 8 Lions tried and failed to stop him on his way to the end zone.
Mack was the prototypical tight end of the NFL, and if not the greatest, certainly one of the 2 or 3 greatest tight ends in the history of professional football.
A force off the field as well, Mackey became the first president of the NFL Players Association. As a union leader, he sued the league to establish free agency in pro football. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1992.
My father always said to me, "Monitor what you're becoming in the pursuit of your goals." I didn't know what it meant when I was a little boy, but I know what it means today. He wanted me to live my life so that it would be a beacon, a shining light for others to follow.
The contrast between then and now is stark. What do you remember about your introduction speech?
Well, I don't remember nothing about it. That's history. I wasn't trying to remember about that, but I went in.
Family and friends first saw changes in the John Mackey they knew 5 years ago. Indifference in finding a job, erratic behavior, memory loss. Jack Kemp, a pro quarterback for 13 years and the friend who introduced Mackey at his Hall of Fame induction, knew something was wrong.
I suggested that I wanted to pay for a neurological exam or some type of an exam of John's health, or maybe even his brain, because it wasn't John Mackey. It wasn't the John Mackey I knew.
In the fall of 2001, doctors diagnosed Mackey, then 59 years old, with frontotemporal dementia. This disease of the brain, similar to Alzheimer's, is rare and incurable. With dementia, John Mackey's memory has begun to erase itself, starting with most recent events first. Over the course of half an hour, Mackey will show you his Super Bowl and Hall of Fame rings a dozen times or so, each showing the first in his mind.
He's a walking symbol of what he used to be.
From college sweetheart to devoted wife, Sylvia Mackey has been the constant in her husband's life for 40 years, the last few a trial all their own.
A regression of the brain is the way I would call it. Almost back to childhood. He always wants to know where we're going. Every 5 minutes, where we're going today. And I'll tell him over and over. I just repeat it, or if I really have something to do on the computer or balance my checkbook or something like that, I'll write it down on a piece of paper in big letters and I'll tape it to the cabinet in the bedroom. And every time he'll say to me, where are we going today? What are we doing? I'll say, go look at the little piece of paper. And he trots on around and looks at it. It's so cute, I have to laugh sometimes.
While their bond is clear, so are the challenges Sylvia faces. About an hour after our interview, Sylvia spoke with John.
When did you do your last interview with ESPN?
I don't remember. When was it? Whenever they asked me to.
Was that today?
I didn't go to ESPN today.
No. Did they come to the house?
I don't know, did they?
While Mackey's mind is often scattered, his passion for life is plentiful, his presence outgoing, warm, endearing.
Touchdown!
The way I see him now, Tom, we are having so much fun. He loves to party and dance now. We always did, but now he's ready anytime I'm ready. He enjoys everything. I've heard, I love you more times in the last 2 years than I heard in the first 38. Now he refers to me as his sweetheart.
5 years ago, Sylvia returned to work as a flight attendant to make ends meet. When she's away for 3 or 4 days in a row, Mackey spends much of his time watching television and taking walks. Pete Wright, a Maryland police corporal and family friend, spends time with Mackey, passing the hours as his companion.
I look back to 4 or 5 years ago when we spent time together. It was certainly a lot more interaction. Now there's times where even after I've been with him all day, at the end of the day, he wouldn't even know he was with me.
For people meeting him for the first time, it can be difficult to sense Mackey's illness at all. At this recent book signing of his biography in Maryland, dozens met him in his favorite role, Baltimore cult great. As he signed each book earnestly, most left without any idea of Mackey's condition. But engaging Mackey in longer conversation is more telling and more difficult, as it was for Jack Kemp when the two friends recently spoke.
It was not a great conversation. You know, it was cliche ridden, but that's just kind of the crutch that he has to use mentally to bridge the gap between us. You know, hey Jack, throw it deep. You know, throw long. I'll go long, you throw it.
When the meat of conversation with him is, Jack, go deep. What does that do to you?
No, it makes me tear up. And it's not his fault because it's not him. He's got that disease and it's very sad.
At 62, John Mackey's body is undiminished. He weighs slightly less than when he played. But dementia casts a shadow over the mind the sufferer cannot see. Though he's been told of his disease and suffers its grip, he lives without knowing or believing anything is wrong.
No doctor has ever told me I had dementia.
No doctor has ever told you that?
No.
Has anyone ever told you that
No.
you suffer from dementia?
No one ever told me that.
What would your reaction be if someone did tell you?
Oh, well, whatever it takes to cure someone, that's what I would do. If I had it, but I don't have it. I don't even know what it is. What is dementia?
What's the hardest part?
Is to look at him and see somebody who used to be able to think and put things together and sort of lead the family to now be dependent on any and everything that I say.
John Mackey's led a great life. He's made great contributions. I just regret that at 62, he's not the John Mackey that could be out helping change the world.
He was never aware of his illness. Sometimes I've found that to be what I consider to be the difference in Alzheimer's and frontal temporal dementia. I'm not sure. But what did I have to do in spite of all of this? I had to remain positive. I had to keep thinking positively and laughing also. How can a caregiver remain positive in the face of all of these adversities? Because now you wear so many hats. You're an activity planner, a nurse, a psychiatrist, a chauffeur, a financial planner, a hygiene expert, and a dietitian. I could go on and on. But most important, what I call the bottom line is you also have to be a self-preservationist, both mentally and physically, or none of those other jobs would get done. But keep in mind constantly that you are now dealing with a person who has become someone he or she would never want to be. They often become counterproductive, not just non-productive, but counterproductive. And eventually, these diseases can make the patient so totally dependent on you that one day they may not know at all who you are. There's no appreciation for your care as a caregiver. But what you have to do is to keep them as comfortable and happy as possible, even when they don't know who you are. And always keep in mind, remember, it's the person, not the disease. I'm sorry. It is the disease, not the person. It's totally the disease, not the person. So we must face this reality and learn to live with it. And when you reach this point, then you can be at peace with yourself. The first steps towards maintaining a positive attitude about yourself is by keeping yourself in the best shape possible. Never feel guilty for anything you have to tell your loved one. You just want to keep the peace and the status quo. If your loved one says it's snowing outside, it's snowing outside. It's okay. You don't have to be upset by what they think. You don't have to worry that you are telling a lie. I would let John go downstairs sometimes to get the mail 15 or 20 times a day. I didn't have to tell him you've already been down there to get the mail. Let him go. In reality, he was really getting more exercise than I was. So he just kept going until I just couldn't let him go anymore. Because one day he went downstairs and he got in a neighbor's car and he wanted to go to work with that neighbor, and it was difficult to get him out. So then I had to constantly watch. Which brings me to another point in self-preservation and having a positive attitude. Laughter is not only good for you, it's good for the loved one with the dementia or the Alzheimer's. There's nothing wrong with laughing at some of the funny things that they do. When John laughed, I would laugh too, and we all became caught up in the moment. Remember, laughter also is a good, free, and instant facelift, and it releases those good endorphins that we all could use sometimes. I often refer to a book called Finding Meaning with Charles by Janet Edmondson. She has certain statements in this book that just always inspired me and kept me going. A few in particular stand out in my mind, and that is what I've talked about before. Approach your loved one sympathetically. A gentle approach can bring a breakthrough in communication, and it's always better than a harsh confrontation. Just as I was able to direct John at the autograph show, it only took 30 seconds, but it was easy, and I talked in a low, soft voice so that he would understand and not become agitated. Accept your loved one for who they are rather than to try to argue, because when you argue, you're just trying to fight a disease that you cannot fight. Would you ask a friend to go to aerobics class with you if the friend had a broken leg and then become frustrated with them because they couldn't keep up? I don't think so. And it's also important to ask for help, just as I did with the police officer here. In fact, he always jumped in and wanted to help me with John. And if I needed to ask him to do something for me, I felt no embarrassment or imposition about it. He wanted to help. He was helping John, and he was helping me. Remember here again, you are a self-preservationist. Now, try to keep your loved one active in things that they like to do, things that they can do and enjoy as long as possible. My daughter and I would take John to the Super Bowl every year for as long as he could go. And he enjoyed being there because he got the attention of the fans and he saw the other ball players. He could relate to an environment that was so familiar to him when he didn't have dementia. These things seemed to come back and stay with them. But eventually traveling to the Super Bowl became a problem with airport security. He began to think that they wanted to steal his Hall of Fame and his Super Bowl rings. When he had to take them off in order to go through the metal detector, it would set off the alarm. And he had to be wanded, and he didn't like that at all. And then as time went on, he began to see that opening at TSA as the way to run through the line. They're all standing there in the same uniform. Now let me go through there and score this touchdown. But one day, that got him in trouble. He ran through, they ran after him, and being a flight attendant, I understand what their job responsibilities are. They knocked him to the ground and had to handcuff him.
When an airline passenger was shot and killed by federal air marshals, it brought up a rarely publicized problem, the possibility that for some people with emotional or mental illnesses, their behavior can suddenly put our security system on high alert and start a dangerous chain of events. CNN's Tom Foreman brings us the story of how this has happened to a man who once made his living taking on everyone who tried to stop him.
35 years ago, John Mackey ran into history, catching a touchdown pass to help the Baltimore Colts win the Super Bowl. He went to the Hall of Fame, and in a condo outside Baltimore, he still talks about it.
Well, I went 75 yards. 75 yards. I went to the Hall of Fame.
Problem is, that's all he talks about. 4 years ago, Mackey was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, a progressive illness that attacks the front of the brain and can cause behavior changes and socially inappropriate actions. It has made John highly protective of his possessions and suspicious of people who try to control him. So airport security is a nightmare, according to his wife Sylvia, who is herself a flight attendant.
The minute John turned that corner and saw those people all in uniform in one line, he was a different person.
Earlier this year, she says, they were going to an autograph signing when John's football ring set off the metal detector. Guards moved in. He tried to run.
They grab him, one on each arm. He elbows the person in the chest, and then two others come out, and it takes 4 people to bring him down to the ground, put his hands behind his back, and handcuff him. I thought, if these 4 people can't hold him and get him to the ground and he takes off running, they will shoot him dead.
No, they won't, because this is what they'll get.
At this point, John interrupts, pounding on the wall and saying no one will shoot him. One of our assistants leads him away so Sylvia can finish.
So they put John in handcuffs, and you said he was slumped over in the chair, and you thought he was having a heart attack.
And I screamed, "Don't kill him. Please don't kill him." And by that, I didn't mean shooting at that time. I just meant
You thought he was
don't
going
get
to
him
have a
so
heart
upset
attack.
that
You
he'd
thought
have a
he was
heart
going to
attack and die.
die.
Right. Right.
John was sent to the hospital, not to jail.
Ain't that see? Typical.
And he can't remember any of it. But his wife can't forget.
And what did you decide after that day?
I decided he will never fly again. That's it.
And after what happened in Miami this week, it's the only decision she is convinced she and her husband can live with. Tom Foreman, CNN, Baltimore.
It was the incident in Miami where the TSA agents shot and killed a bipolar person with his wife. And I was so inspired hearing that story about the wife, the way she was talking to the husband before the incident happened, that I just happened to get up with as little computer knowledge as I knew at that time and typed an email to CNN, and they called me at midnight that night to hear John's story, because I thought, oh, it's just too similar. Her tone of voice, the way it was described, that the passengers were listening to it, was the same tone of voice that I would be talking to my husband with on an airplane and leading up to security. But it didn't work that day. But fortunately for John Mackey, again in Baltimore, instead of taking him to jail, because he was John Mackey, because he was a Baltimore Colt, they let him be released through a hospital. And when we got to the hospital, And he gets out of the ambulance, he runs down the emergency room and, hey, Super Bowl Hall of Fame ring, he's signing autographs for everybody. I'm a basket case. They come up to me and they say, Mackie? I say, yes. And then they want to put they want to take my blood pressure. I said, no, you've got the wrong Mackie. Right, there he is. I could hardly get myself together. But now I knew that there was another Super Bowl coming up where if the Super Bowl had been in Baltimore, he could go. So I decided I'm going to make this work. Again here, positive thinking. So I called TSA a month ahead of time, and they had it set up where he could go in, be screened all by himself, and then on the return, of course, they couldn't do it the same way, but they had let Phoenix know that John Mackey would be coming back. And I had brought with me autographed pictures that he could sign and give to the nice people that would distract him, redirect again, while I snatched his shoes off, which of course anybody with dementia doesn't understand why you're snatching their shoes off, but I snatched his shoes off and threw them up on the conveyor belt while he signed the autographs for the nice people. So again, it's the way you have to make things work. I also learned that anything mandated by the NFL worked to get him to do anything I wanted him to do. Now, one of the traits, of course, we all know with people with Alzheimer's and dementia is their lack for personal hygiene. That is going to happen. And when it happens, I didn't want to be frustrated with it, but I found out that to get him to take a shower, as that became very difficult, I came up with NFL Shower Day. Wow, that worked like a charm. And then as that became more and more difficult, I would tell him that the then commissioner, Paul Tagliabue, was going to give a check to every retired player who took a shower that day, a check for $1,000. Then by the time he got out of the shower, he'd already forgotten about the check. And as that became more difficult, I'd take my cell phone, call the house phone, answer the house phone, and tell him that Commissioner Tagliabue was on the phone and wanted to know if he was going to see him today. Was he taking a shower? Do you want to talk to him? No. I'm getting in the shower. So I had to escalate the story a little bit too. Now, another issue that we never want to talk about is that we know incontinence is coming. That's inevitable. But I've seen so many families wait and be frustrated at the last second and just become frustrated with the patient and not want to do anything about it or feel embarrassed. But it's going to happen. So I prepared early, more than a year in advance. I bought adult underwear and I brought it home and I gave it to John. I said, honey, look what the NFL sent. I said, open it. He opened it. Yeah. He said, can I try them on? Yeah. He tried it on. He went over to the mirror. He patted himself front and back, and he said, hey, these are nice. Problem totally solved. So when the need actually came, it was well worth the advanced anticipation. Now, by keeping him active, going back to the Hall of Fame every year, I noticed that there were more and more ball players stricken with Alzheimer's or dementia or on the verge of it. When I say on the verge, I knew this because I had come out with it publicly. I didn't want to try to hide why my loved one is acting so strange. That's frustrating enough and wearing on your own body in itself. And I could tell when a wife was going to approach me with a question about something her husband was doing that she wanted to know from me, did John do that? Is my husband maybe coming down with this? What should I do? Well, I felt, just from all the questions and the ball players that I saw who were stricken in this small group of Hall of Famers, 264 out of the whole 25,000 NFL retiree group, I felt that something had to be done by the NFL to help these players and all retired players, because there's a common denominator here. In this football gathering, there are just too many for this just to be a coincidence. Every NFL player, retired, Hall of Famer or not, is responsible for the rise of the National Football League. And the league continues to ride on their legacies, whether they were Hall of Famers or not. So I wrote a letter to Paul Tagliabue, and I told the story exactly the way I saw it. I didn't need to exaggerate. I didn't need to embellish anything. These diseases are 100% incurable, 100% fatal, and deplete families both emotionally and financially. I said in the letter, Paul, how could the NFL let so many of its own lose their dignity with such devastation? And that's when the NFL sat down and created the 88 plan. That's 88, named after my husband's jersey from college and in the NFL. Thus, it makes me very happy to know how this plan has helped so many people. It is so gratifying for me to hear all of the positive changes the 88 plan has made in so many lives, from the player all the way down to their grandchildren. Thus, in my efforts to constantly find something good in everything, I call my husband the face of concussion, because he is the new beginning of help for so many players. And this is what he would want if he ever knew he would come down with something so devastating. So in my intention to carry on his mission, I hopefully one day pray that the 88 plan will no longer be needed, because there will be a prevention and a cure. Yes, July 6, 2011, I lost the love of my life, but I will never lose the life in my love for him and his legacy. Thank you so much. Thank you.